All right, so we're live, and oh, thank you. But yeah, we're here again at the One Art Space at the Jack Kirby from the Ghetto to the Cosmos pop-up, and it's great to see everybody here. People taking in the show, just we're randomly streaming in a way, and I'm Rand Hoppy. I'm the director of the museum and the founder, and very pleased to have offered some time to Adam McGovern to talk about Jack and the cosmos. So I think I'll just hand it over to you now, and we can get started, right?
Many thanks. What's the best way of knowing if I'm audible on this?
Are we audible? Please let us know. It looks like we are. So I'm seeing little flashing lights.
Send me insults in the comments.
That's right. All right. I am going to do that. And we'll do that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. And should I just be reaching over to? Okay. I'm able to pull it towards myself. Or no?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. So we'll get right to the start, to the beginning of all things. In the beginning, God created Kirby, and Kirby found it necessary to reinvent him. Actually, I'm already lying. God created Jacob Kurtzberg, and he created Jack Kirby, and went on to start many universes of his own. Kurtzberg's youth was attended by the word of God. Family anecdote held that a grave childhood illness was lifted when a ring of rabbis circled his bed and banished the demon. Jack Kirby's sacred text was said to be a discarded pulp magazine that he found in a gutter. It opened his mind to the alternate visions of science fiction and the coming world it promised, which was seen as a new kind of heaven on earth, though he would carry after images of his own world and the doubts it fostered in him into all the futures he would ever imagine. The creation story of his fourth world cycle was that of a warlike race of gods that had self-destructed in a cataclysm that split their home into two opposing planets, the abundant and peaceful New Genesis and the hellish industrial apocalypse. Apocalypse was a hell on high, based on the tenements of Kirby's upbringing and even emblazoned with place names like Armageddon. But New Genesis was not all it seemed. Heaven also had an underclass. While the golden gods lived in a levitating city in the sky, in the cracks of the planet beneath, an insect-like race of beings, evolved from the old world's biological agents, struggled in their shadow, denigrated as the bug. The creation story of Kirby's later series, The Eternals, was that we ourselves are a cosmic cell culture, human evolution jump-started by a spacefaring race of giants called Celestials, who seed planets as a genetic experiment and come back to judge how it turned out. On Earth, they took primates and created standard humans, a perfect race of acolytes called Eternals, on whom we mistakenly based the gods of myth, and an accidental offshoot known as Deviants, who went down in history as the dragons and monsters of legend. Kirby had a speaking in tongues writing style which seemed stilted to some at the time, but reads like beat poet prophecy now. And he would sometimes take his beats from actual scripture. Kirby realized that biblical text was the mass media of its time, and by the time of his childhood, movies, not least Hollywood biblical epics, had taken its place. This would be imprinted on him forever. That headline on the splash page we're seeing is the point size of a Cecil B. DeMille voiceover. Kirby would not have believed that science had replaced God, but he understood that our worship had been displaced to technology. The interdimensional despot, Darkseid, is in search of a way to control all free will that he calls the anti-life equation. The intergalactic judge of all humanity, Arishem, has encoded on his looming thumbs down what is called the formula for mass death. With modern culture mystified by technology, Kirby realized the wavering line between equation and incantation. We were in its spell, under its thumb, so to speak. And in at least one instance, with a hat tip to the Handmaid's Tale, under its eye. The future super soldier OMAC, his very name a modern-day tetragrammaton for one-man army corps, was created by remote, quote, hormone surgery when dystopian office drone Buddy Blank got zapped from space by a satellite AI named Brother Eye. OMAC is meant to police a world on the verge of destroying itself by being the biggest dog on the global block. And he's fed life-giving energy and intel on invasions and terrorist ops by this heavenly voice in his head. It was a high-tech simulacrum of Jesus' divine conception, except here the Savior is designed for violence and takes over the body of the person the spark was put into. The animatronic god was a theme that Kirby first perfected when the Fantastic Four encountered Galactus, a cosmic predator who survives like an interstellar shark, sailing from planet to planet, absorbing the energy of its core and leaving it lifeless. He's defeated in part when his servant, the Silver Surfer, who once scouted worlds for him to devour, decides to side with Earth and defy him. Kirby explicitly considered this an analogy of humans declaring their emancipation from God. He saw the expulsion from paradise as a kind of victory and self-definition for Adam and Eve, a natural maturation process. Much later in his career, and mostly for his private collection, he would depict a non-metaphorical Yahweh himself. We see God creating the world growing corrupt, and God turning away from his creation in despair. Not the unsympathetic deity that Galactus represented, but this shows Kirby's conception of a schism between the God who created us and the ones we fabricate. It's interesting to note that God's real Almighty is naked, like Adam and Eve. He is everything he needs. We're clued in that Galactus is profane because he is synonymous with his regalia. He is enclosed in tech, and you can't really picture him without it. This suggests an ambivalence on Kirby's part to the advancements that seem to fascinate him. We can create false idols to worship, manufacture what we think is our savior, and we might be clued into how genuine or deceptive that is by how much machinery surrounds it. When New Genesis's warrior general Isaiah makes his transformation to the peaceful patriarch High Father, it's signaled by a shedding of his armor, both literal and figurative, to stand naked before the higher spiritual power known as the Source. By the time Kirby creates the Celestials, who are very much in the same totemic tech design aesthetic as Galactus, we see not even a face, not even an inch of skin. Metamorphoses in name and form, like Isaiah's to High Father and Buddy Blank's to OMAC, are a centerpiece of religious conversion narratives, and they were a preoccupation of Kirby's. We all know the Hulk, and some of us know the demon, Etrigan. Few of us know that another story of transformation was adapted by Kirby when he wrote and drew a licensed comic expansion of Kubrick's 2001. Even kids of the time wondered with a bit of exasperation why every issue or two Kirby would replay the basic arc of a mortal going through a psychedelic ordeal and emerging as the space baby of the movie's finale. But clearly Kirby wanted to confirm that this transcendence was possible. The champion of New Genesis, Orion, was secretly a child of Apocalypse raised on the rival planet and would use the talismanic digital device called a mother box to rearrange the molecules of his craggy face to resemble someone of his adopted world. Kirby came from the street, and it was a code he wanted to believe he could reprogram. The Bible has another Jacob whose name changes after he encounters a divine being, and Kirby depicted this too, tellingly as another conflict between flesh and mechanism. It's fascinating to see the intricateness but evident fragility of the angel's cybernetic armor compared to the texture of Jacob's skin. The creases in his legs look like cracks in stone, mortared back together. He's already broken, but he's as broken as he's going to get, while the angel is a delicate construction with a lot more to lose. We're back to the contest between heaven and earth that was allegorized with Galactus and the Silver Surfer, and it's important to note how absent the idea of the good father is from Kirby's worldview. High Father's appearances in the Fourth World Cycle combined could probably fit in a single 20-page comic with room to spare, while his opponent Darkseid, who aims to be the whole universe's abusive dad, is very much the co-star of every series. It's striking that in Kirby's one dramatization of his own origin, as you see on the wall over here, his mother figures pivotally, but his father is barely mentioned, let alone present. The feral children of that narrative do play out the conception of humans' relation to God in all of Kirby's storytelling. His work is full of abandoned children and those who seem forsaken by God and forced to define themselves and fend for their own survival. Years after the Fourth World and before Street Code, he would return to the setting of his childhood, updated yet tellingly familiar with the mostly unpublished, decidedly non-cosmic dingbats of Danger Street, a darkly comic adventure of unhoused kids, each failed by the system in their own way. The Mr. Miracle character began as the infant son of the widowed Highfather, who sends him to Apocalypse in exchange for Darkseid's son Orion to ensure a fragile ceasefire. There he becomes a faceless child soldier in the Gulag planet's boot camp orphanages, ironically named Scot-Free. He develops a talent for escape, eventually fleeing to Earth and rejecting both patriarchs' worlds. It's the Moses story, with our hero raised in the enemy's camp and unaware of who he truly is. And then it becomes the Jesus story, with a gentle figure who breaks from the authority of the past. The Silver Surfer get that editing software ready. The Silver Surfer is another shifting metaphor, having also been interpreted as a renegade angel. He is a shining figure from space, and Lucifer's name means morning star. That suggests a dim view of his God in more ways than one. But then again, the Hebrew Bible tells us that Moses' skin shone after he'd been in contact with Yahweh. So maybe these stories are just about what we take away with us to build the new person we can be. The Jewish conception of God is one of covenants, and that implies independence as much as obligation. I don't know Kirby to have had any issue with his own father, but he was centrally concerned with older generations leaving an ethical legacy for younger ones. He admired the 1960s counterculture and made them into heroes like the Forever People. And time and again, he showed a feminine principle as being the essential factor in living wholly and deciding well. If the Silver Surfer was the Adam figure defying his God, the Eve figure here was not someone, quote unquote, tempting him into the wrong path, but the human artist Alicia Masters, who calls him to reconnect with his compassion. No one with Kirby's sense of history and his love of lore could reject what or who came before him, but independence from older ways of thinking and seeing was the story of his whole career. Jack Kirby had to create himself, and he showed us what a self can look like, and a way to it that only each of us can find. The end. As usual, I have no idea how long or short that was, so I'm happy to entertain any Q&A or thoughts, observations, personal reminiscences, as you know some people in the audience have.
I'll start.
Yes.
Okay. I noticed in the picture of the mother, sort of similarity to Granny Goodness, just in the look of her, and what you're saying about the feminine being closer to the godly. She kind of blows up that idea in the comics, right? Doesn't she? Like, she's not good at all, I think.
That is true, yeah. The questioner is asking about the Granny Goodness character who runs the boot camp orphanage on Apocalypse, where Scot-Free grows up. Yeah, she is certainly a perversion of the concept of motherhood, though I think later writers like Cecil Castellucci, who did a miniseries called Female Furies about the women who grow up on Apocalypse, have kind of recast the Granny Goodness character as, someone who kind of goes along to get along in a weird world like Apocalypse, and have some, I don't know about sympathy, but empathy, with that. And I think she still does remain anomalous in terms of, Kirby's female characters, because it's also Barda, the person who is, raised as a warrior, who actually gives Scott the courage and the chutzpah to leave Apocalypse. She was clearly she's widely considered to be an analog for Kirby's own wife, and he would, a local comics store guy in my area talks about how he went to a con and he was like first dating his wife, and he like dragged her to a Comic-Con, and Kirby was actually giving a Q&A, and somebody said, what's the most important, who is your best partner ever? And he says, my best partner is like, that guy has the idea. It was my wife, because you need somebody who supports you in your life and your career. So yeah, I think that and Granny Goodness is nothing if not a strong character. She's not really a stereotypical hag. She's somebody who is formidable. So
sort of reminded me of the mom, in the drawing, just the art.
Interesting. That might just be a vagary of because even by the time, you see the phenomenalness of this double splash, but his abilities were failing a bit by the time he did that, and I think that there's some shorthand in some untrueness in the physiognomy and stuff. So I think it was, coincidental if there's, similarities, because he certainly wouldn't have wanted to analogize his mom as as Granny.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Okay, so I worked in Marvel Comics in the 70s and 80s. So I knew Jack slightly, because I was Stan's assistant for a little bit before I became Vinnie Colletta's assistant as art director in DC. But Jack was always a gentleman. Just a couple of times I met him, and the thing that was now thinking back to Kirby, what he was doing at that time, this is 76. So he was doing Eternals, he was doing the Captain America, which I love that stuff. In fact, I took all the issues of Eternals on New Gods. I had them bound into hardcover volumes myself. But some of the people there, won't name names, would make fun of Jack's writing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, oh, it's whatever. And I know that some of it was altered or whatever at the time, but at that time, within fandom, Jack was almost being considered almost passé.
Uh-huh.
By the time he came out with Captain Victory, another one which I love, some people will say, oh, when in retrospect now, looking at what he did, it's an entire epic. It's a connected epic, because New God was supposed to be originally at Marvel, because Ragnarok, Thor was supposed to die, and New God was supposed to take over, and Stan didn't want to do that to the merchandising. Jack created his own universe.
Yeah.
So there is a relationship, if you look with the characters between New God to Captain Victory and even Silver Star. If you're familiar with Silver Star.
Right.
Just for that. But they he has been me as an artist, and I've worked on a lot of books. I work on my own character, Astronaut Starsong, and Bronx Heroes in Trouble. But whatever. But I didn't put it in the plug, sorry. But in any case, he's more appreciated now, and this stuff should be in the Museum of Modern Art, but that's like,
Well, you know, and that kind of, in some ways, ties in with the theme of this talk, because the style that Kirby used could almost be described as prophetic. You know, it's almost, I mean, I said speaking in tongues, and that is, you know, he had this kind of, you know, not word salad, but, you know, it was almost like the automatic writing of like a surreal or a beat. It does turn out to hold up a lot better over the decades, you know, and sometimes that does have to skip a generation. You know, he can be so far ahead of his time, you know, somebody can be so far ahead of their time that it belongs more, you know, to a later time. I mean, one great phrasing that Grant Morrison, the current, revered comic writer, used to me is that he said, I love Kirby's non-naturalistic style. You know, he actually was, embracing the fact that it is not, you know, that it can be stilted, but, you know, embracing that as a kind of alternative way of seeing things. I mean, one thing that always struck me is, like, especially in the New Gods books, in the Fourth World books, there will be, I mean, one of the things Kirby was notorious for was overuse, well, some would say abuse of quotation marks. Like Darkseid will say, like, I'm going to, employ the anti-life equation, the cosmic, quote, wipeout, unquote, and things like this. But at the same time, you would have other phrases where, like, they would say something like Orion would say, I'll see you eventually, we'll fight to the death on the plane called Last Battle. And I thought that's a very strange way of putting it, but it's almost as if you're seeing something translated from an alien language where some phrases you just couldn't, get an analog for. So you have to say, like, Last Battle. I think that he was, it ties in with his art practice. People have described standing next to him as he was sitting at the drawing board, because basically his home, as most of you probably know, was open to any fan who would come in, and he would just keep drawing at the drawing board like a machine. And he actually literally drew, people describe it as being like a plotter. He would start in the upper left-hand corner of a panel and like draw it down, not like doing preliminary sketches or something, almost as if it was like coming to him on this cosmic feed. We saw that picture of the satellite sending OMAC, the data dump into his brain. And I think he really was kind of getting messages from the beyond. And, that's a description of prophecy, right? I think, people relate to that more, in a postmodern sense, we're more keyed into like a telegraphic way of talking, be it, rap, ways of, things that are a little more likenable to things that have to do with ritual chanting, and something that I'm sure you can tell, sir, is that like a lot of the people who were making fun of him back then, their stuff has not stood the test of time in the way, they were all they were the quote relevant writers who would, take what they thought was, the hip jargon of the time. And nowadays you read it and it's completely corny. Whereas Kirby's stuff is on another dimension. It's really timeless. It doesn't go out of style. So
one other thing, just on the side. So Kirby, again, prophetic. Another guy, G. Roddenberry, also I felt in the same vein, prophetic. Kirby would talk about aliens and other dimensions, whatever. So now we're having the congressional hearings where all these experts are saying, well, you know what? These UFOs or whatever, we don't know where they're from. And then some of them are saying there's a new documentary out there. No, we do have crafts that crash. We do have bodies. The one stuff is true. So Kirby is way ahead of the scale as far as predicting this stuff, which ultimately will become, but there are aliens, there are other dimensions, there are all this stuff that he's talking about is all true.
And he didn't always have a vocabulary for it, but it's fascinating how he could depict it. Like, I don't know if we've got any here, but like the series that he did not create, but I think took over with Joe Simon, Blue Bolt, which was, kind of a slightly more superheroic version of Flash Gordon or something in the 1930s. I finally saw some reprints of that, and I was amazed that they were like going to other dimensions, what we would understand to be other dimensions, and like seeing, like disjointed, almost cubist looking beings, which I know nowadays they say that's how it would look to us because we would actually, our senses are not equipped, to perceive the full dimensions of if there are living beings in other dimensions. So yeah, it was fascinating the extent that he was able to foresee these things and kind of get a foretaste and a foreknowledge.
Both stories are actually quite terrific. If anyone look at them, they're around. They're really prophetic as far as things that he did later on show up in those stories.
Yeah. Yes, Robin.
Well, I love it that you mentioned the change of name from Jacob to Israel.
Yeah.
Israel means to struggle with divine beings and survive. And that seems to capture so much of what happens in the Kirby universe, either superheroes or divine beings.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, well, struggle was the medium of his whole existence, right? I mean, he's very accurate about, these daily brawls, these rumbles that he would have, as a kid. And of course, he then survived World War II, and he was very much in the thick of that. He was infantry. So he had no luxury of, being removed from, my dad was a bomber. He was removed from these things, but Kirby was not. And it's really, I mean, as a side note, it's a miracle that Kirby survived because, people like Joe Simon, people like Will Eisner, had access to better connections, or they were, I guess, maybe, higher class to begin with. And, they all got jobs stateside, jobs where their, life was not in danger. But yeah, and I think, Kirby found himself in battle for the rest of his life. He thought that, his credit was being stolen by partners like Stan Lee. And, he was in these years-long legal battles. I know I was sitting in a con one year in the late 70s when the comic artist Neil Adams, who was always a rabble rouser and an agitator, was trying to start. He dare not call it a union, but he said he was going to start a comic artist guild. And he let us know that he had called up Kirby, and Kirby had said, if you form it, I'll be the first to join, and if you want, I'll bring a gun. So he always had that bare knuckle thing. I mean, people talk about, and this is also dramatized in the novel Cavalier and Clay, that one day some American neo-Nazis came to what was then called Timely Comics, would become Marvel Comics studios, and they were calling up saying that they were there to kill him because he created Captain America, and he's like, oh, hold on, I'm going to come down, and he basically let him know he was going to come down to clock them, and by the time he got down there, they were gone. But that was his. Without being a bully, he certainly thought that he could always expect struggle. And getting back to your point, I mean, endemic to that was, I think, yes, a basic understanding that he was on his own. I mean, he was an observant Jew. He was, he was in no way an iconoclast, but he was also a modern Jew in that he, saw what the mythological aspects of these things could be. I mean, it's no coincidence that he was an observant Jew who also created Thor as a superhero and did all these things. In the booth there, you'll see Lord of Light, where he was doing, the Hindu deities, etc. He didn't have any parochialism about depicting, other pantheons, and he didn't have access to a belief that that God was going to give you any favors or shortcuts. Yes.
What brought you to the conclusion of Silver Surfer being likened to the Lightbringer? I like the way you
Oh, thank you.
explained that. What brought you to that conclusion?
Just free association and a wandering attention span. Because as you start to run like the comparisons in your mind, it's like, yes, well, he's the shining figure. He is kind of likenable. He's like a sci-fi angel. Which is an image that Kirby would come to time and again. Actually, Light Ray from the New Gods is like that, probably others who I'm forgetting about at the moment. But that image of the shiny human is something he also returned to. I don't have slides of it, but many of you will remember how in the story, The Glory Boat, which itself sounds like the name of a gospel song, from the New Gods number 6, Richard Sheridan, this like pacifist guy who just gets mixed up in the gods' war, is like murdered by one of the apocalypse gods. And in a bizarre sequence, in one of many bizarre events, Light Ray like sanctifies him by like laying on his hand and turning him into this bizarre silver being that they then lay on like this funeral bier that like they ride into final battle with the apocalypse guys. And then in Commandy, the Last Boy on Earth, speaking of abandoned children narratives, I left that one out. Kirby's actual big hit of the 70s was called Commandy, the Last Boy on Earth, about the last human on a Planet of the Apes-like planet where all the other, lots of animals got sentience. But anyway, he's friends with these mutants who survived the cataclysm that created the world of talking animals. And they also have this like, what is that? What is that like? Yeah. What is like the Staples? That was easy button. Whatever it is. It's like they have like one of those like in their chest, which they slap, and yes, the quote cyclotron in their hearts is activated, and they get this silver sheen, over their bodies. So that was a recurrent, trope of Kirby's. Not that all those characters were analogous to angels, but Light Ray certainly was, and the Silver Surfer, was too. I mean, Kirby never did, and I don't think ever would say specifically, I'm a Satanist and this is Lucifer. But there's no other comparison you can make if you think of the Silver Surfer as being an angel because he's rebelling, Kirby was, to use another term from theology, Kirby was nothing if not a syncretic creator. He would take merge influences from a billion different directions, which is why refreshingly, you can't do any one-to-one comparison of any of his characters and say, this is Adam, this is, Eve, this is, Satan. But I think the free association lends itself to that, if that answers your question with any sense. Anyone else?
All right.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
And I'm going to kill the live stream. So thanks, everybody who was online. And thank you. We'll see you.